Like other Accpac modules, the Purchase Orders module contains a Setup Options icon used to define global settings and default to selected fields. The company page displays the company details as entered within the company profile. The lower portion is where specific contact and phone information can be entered, in this case for the Purchase Order module. On the Processing page, the first option shows the functional currency that was determined when the company profile was established. However, notice the field to the right called Multi-Currency. If the Multi-Currency module is installed, and if Multi-Currency was selected on the company profile for both Common Services and Accounts Payable, this option is automatically activated and is shown for reference purposes only. If the Multi-Currency module is not installed or activated for this database, the Multi-Currency checkbox does not appear. The rate type, to the right, determines the exchange rate type to use as a default, as defined in the currency tables. The Allow Non-Inventory Items field determines if purchase orders can be created using items that do not exist in inventory control. This option is useful when creating purchase orders for internal items such as office supplies that are not physically stocked or sold. A warning is displayed when a non-stock item is entered by selecting this next option. Selecting this option eliminates those errors where the user simply entered an existing item code incorrectly. The Keep Transaction History option maintains transaction details of documents that have been processed in purchase orders. Although saving transaction history utilizes disk space, this option is normally selected to keep transaction details for reviewing or auditing purposes within a particular time frame. This causes all posted purchase documents to print on the transaction list report, rather than just the current documents. In addition, retaining history allows you to drill into completed documents to view the details from not only within purchase orders, but accounts payable and general ledger as well. If the data is no longer needed, it can be cleared at any time, so retaining it, at least for a short period of time, is beneficial. The Allow Non-Existing Vendors option allows purchase requisitions and purchase orders to be created for vendors that have not yet been added in accounts payable. For example, different employees may have specific job duties, and although the vendor is known, they simply have not been added yet. The only requirements are that the non-existent vendor code entered on the document must match the code when the vendor is added later, and the vendor must be added before receipts and invoices are posted. The default template code identifies the preferred settings when entering new documents, which may save data entry time because template codes contain specific defaults for fields. More on this later. If you use inventory control, use the default item cost option to select the type of cost to display when entering purchase documents. When you enter item details, the cost associated with the item displays, but a different cost can be entered. If you do not use inventory control, the default cost becomes the vendor cost entered for the item. The Post-AP Batches option determines when and how vendor invoices entered in purchase orders are to update accounts payable. The options displayed here depend on how transactions are costed within inventory control. In IC Options, if you elected to cost transactions immediately when transactions are posted, then the options here are during posting or on request using Create Batch icon. If you elected to cost transactions in inventory at the end of the day using the day-end processing routine, then the options here are during day-end processing or on request using Create Batch icon. If during posting is selected here, Purchase Orders creates and posts each invoice to the vendor account immediately when it is posted within Purchase Orders. If during day-end processing is selected, Purchase Orders retains the posting of the vendor invoices temporarily until the day-end processing routine is performed. And if on request using the Create Batch icon is selected, Purchase Orders retains the processing of the vendor invoice for accounts payable temporarily until the Create Batch icon within the periodic processing icon of Purchase Orders is performed. The selection can have a large impact on the speed of processing transactions in purchase orders, as well as the number of AP batches that Purchase Orders creates. Therefore, if a substantial amount of invoices are processed for the day, it may be better to use either day-end processing or on request using the Create Batch icon options. The default posting date option determines which date the program displays by default as the posting date when receipts, invoices, returns, credit notes, or debit notes are entered. The posting date determines the fiscal period and year the transaction is to be assigned in a general ledger. The options are Document Date and Session Date. Choose Document Date to have the system use the date entered for the document, such as receipt, invoice, etc., as the default posting date. Choose Session Date to have the system use the date Accpac was started for the default posting date. In either case, the posting date can be changed. Next, determine when the cost value for a posted item is to be updated, either when the receipt for the item is posted or when the invoice for the item is posted. For some companies, the invoice for items purchased does not always arrive at the same time as the actual merchandise. Occasionally, the final merchandise total found on the invoice is slightly different than what is expected, which may be due to a change in shipping or handling charges. So the question then is, when should inventory update the cost? Is it when items are received or when they are invoiced? Depending on your company's procedures, selecting the correct option may eliminate unnecessary adjustments later. Select Receipt to have inventory control update the costs for the item when the receipt is posted, or upon the next day end. Select Invoice to have inventory update the costs for the item when the invoice is posted, or upon the next day end, such as a few days later. Although the invoice option may appear to be more accurate, be advised that inventory uses the most recent cost for an item if the actual cost is not known yet. If the option is set to invoice costing here, and someone sells one of the received items before the invoice is posted, the most recent cost for the item is used. This may or may not be the invoice price entered later, in which case an adjustment may be needed. However, if receipt costing was selected instead, the cost posted with the actual item being sold would have been updated and no adjustment would be necessary, unless the actual invoice cost turned out to be different than the receipt cost. The Accumulate Purchase History option indicates to keep information about the items being sold, as well as the vendor information. This information can be viewed when orders are entered or on selected printed reports. The information can be saved based on a fiscal year or a calendar year, where a period can be a week, representing 52 periods a year, a month, representing 12 periods a year, all the way to annually, in which all purchases are represented in a single period for the year. If selected, the Accumulate Statistics option retains purchase amount totals and dates for vendors, such as largest purchase or the number of purchases for a specific period. The ability to modify statistical amounts is available by selecting the Allow Edit of Statistics option, either to establish beginning values or to make corrections. Like purchase history, statistics can be accumulated by calendar year or fiscal year, and again based on a weekly schedule all the way up to annually. When setting up a new database, click the Accumulate Statistics option to allow someone the ability to establish previous period values. However, this option is not normally selected when the system is up and running because Accpac automatically updates the values as transactions are entered. But there may be times when corrections need to be made. One other point regarding history and statistics is to not change the time period from which the amounts are tracked in the middle of the accounting year. The reason is because the previous posted periods no longer match for comparison purposes. For example, if you were tracking history or statistics monthly and then elected to change them to weekly, what was month 1, 2, 3, etc. is now week 1, 2, 3, so future periods do not represent the same time frame as previously posted periods. The last two fields refer to purchase requisitions. The first option copies cost values, if entered, from the requisition to the purchase order the requisition creates. Not selecting this option uses the vendor contract costs and/or item costs as a default. The second and last option activates an approval routine for requests. Select this option to require someone with appropriate user rights to approve a requisition before it can be converted to a purchase order. If requisitions require approval, Accpac security must be in use for the database, and the user must be given the approval security right. Those users not possessing this security right can only create requisitions. The Documents page is where the document aging periods are established to be used on specific reports, such as the Aged Purchase Orders report. The lower portion of the window determines the length of the document number for each document type and what the prefix of the document is. The system uses the designated next number as the starting point and increments from there for each document type created. The length of any document number can be up to 22 characters, including the prefix.
Now, let's take a look at the General Ledger integration functions.